And now I would like to introduce Dominic. So Dominic runs a UX consultancy, Siso, and he will share with us some tips from his 22 years in the world of web and software design and development. So get ready for some fast-paced action. 25 UX tips in 25 minutes. There you go.
Hello. Just wait for it to load up. Hi, I'm Dominic. You should be seeing my presentation now. I'm just going to go straight into it, nice and quick. Let's go. Number 25. Edge cases. Whenever you're thinking about your designs, you need to think about your edge cases. Think about don't worry, the user will never do that. I don't need to worry about that. But sometimes you do. So it's always good to write down your edge cases, keep them as a list, and not design for all of them, because otherwise you'll end up with hundreds and hundreds of designs. But actually think about them, write them down as a list, and then once you've come to the end of your designs, just do a sanity check. Look, if anybody did one of those, would they end up down a rabbit hole? Do you have clear messaging to help them out? And also it's good to have a list, because then if you're doing any usability testing, you can then go back to those edge cases and just check them off. Next, 24, Fitt's law. In 1954, Paul Fitt was studying the human motor system. And what he discovered was that the time it takes to move from one point to another is dependent on the size of the point that you're going to. So for instance, if you took the common easy task of asking someone to go and stand in a corner, it won't take them very much time because the corner is quite large. But if you ask them to go and stand on this particular dot on the floor in a corner, it will take them longer because they'll have to look for the dot, find where it is, and then stand there. So the same principles apply when designing a website. Think about where the person is and where the person wants to go. So if you've got an input box, where is the next input box in relation to the last one? Where is the call to action in relation to the input box? Most literature only talk about the position of components, but you've also got to think about where's the person's eyes. So if you've got text, what would happen if someone only skim read half the text and then they decided they knew the answer, so they moved on? Where would they need to go? So think about not just the position of the cursor, but also their eyes. Next, right, whenever you're running a workshop, Post-it notes are everybody's friend. But what about the pens? What pens should you use? I would say always use Sharpies. Obviously, other markers are available, but get your Sharpies out. And the reason why is because Sharpies over biros, because Sharpies allow people to get straight to the point because there's not much space to write on. And if you give them a biro, then they often go into too much detail and spend too much time on one thing, or they try and put too much information down, or they do some unnecessary thinking and drilling down into things when you actually want them to get straight to the point and straight onto the next one. But obviously you can't tell people that that's why you want them to use a Sharpie. So what you can do is you can just say to them, what we're going to do is once we've done this exercise, we're going to share it. So to make it easier for people to see, please use the Sharpie so that it's nice and big in letters, when actually you're getting them to get straight to the point. Next, the fold is still important. So if you were at UX New Zealand 2019, you would have seen part one of this, but the video's online, and part one was all about the fact that the studies have shown that if you've got a multiple page website, people spend 57% of the time above the fold. So the fold is still important, but this is a different kind of fold. This is the pizza fold. So whenever you go to a meetup, the food of choice is often pizza. So what you should do is you should fold your pizza over, therefore creating an easy to hold pizza. There are 4 reasons for doing this. 1, gets your food quicker. 2, it keeps your hands clean. 3, it keeps one of your hands free to talk or to shake hands or write things down. And 4, it's a great talking point in order to start networking. Easy. 21, design system, speak the right language. Okay, right. So design system is one of those terms that means different to different people. What you've got is Fundamentally, a design system is made up of three things: a style guide showing the visual aspects, a component library where people have coded up the style guide, and the design history rationale, those decisions that you made whilst doing the designs that made you choose one thing over another. But quite often, some people think of a design system in a different way. And if you have those differences, then expectations can be a lot different and you might not get it. Because some people only think of a design system as being that style guide and component library, and you don't have those decisions or links back to user testing that you might have in your design history rationale. So make sure that people are speaking the same language. 20, the same is for MVP. This is another term where people often change what they're thinking, and this can have very, very different outcomes. So for instance, some people think of an MVP as that first release built on a planned infrastructure, but containing a subset of the overall features that the end product's designed to have, but it's enough to get the product launched so that you can get it out there. But some people think of it, an MVP, as being that first release built quickly just to get out there, just to test the idea with users without too much cost. The difference is that the first one has the building blocks that you're going to build upon, whereas the other one, often the code gets thrown away. And if people have those different expectations and people think that this is just a throwaway code, and then you go to launch it and then you realize that, oh, actually the client I was working with thought it was just a first building block, that can cause serious issues. Next, 19. Okay, behavioral flows. Behavioral flows in Google Analytics are a really good way of doing some analysis of your users. So in Universal Analytics, you can see a behavioral flow like this. In GA4, they're slightly different and they're slightly hidden away. They're in the custom and under pathway flows. But what's really good about these is you can see what page people go from one page to another, how they go through it. You can also see with the red lines where people drop off. But there's other things that you can tell from these. So for instance, by using the cog, you can set up what page you want to start on if you want to make a detailed report about one particular page. You can also add segments to this to get rid of those only have non-bounce sessions and not have those people that just come to the site, decide that they don't want to actually be there and leave again. But I really like it because you can do things like look at search, how people behave around search. So for instance, I was working with a government organisation that had a knowledge base that they were recreating. So we were looking at their existing knowledge base and looking at the behavioural flows. It identified that from their search results, a lot of people were going directly to the section pages, section landing pages, or the home page. So we thought, there's something is an issue there. So when we were doing our code design workshops and any user interviews that we did, we made sure that we spoke to people about search. And what it turned out was people didn't trust search. People found that there either were not enough results, but less results than they were expecting, or more results than they were expecting, and they didn't have that comfort in the search. The same was for the section landing pages. If, for instance, you've got a section landing page and you see lots of people going directly from there to search, you've got to question, are your pathways and call to actions designed correctly on your section landing pages in order to help users out? Next, match font line height grid. This is a simple tip. Whenever you're designing your layouts and your fonts and the line heights for those fonts, align them to your grid. It makes it a lot easier. So if, for instance, you're using an 8-point grid, then have your line heights in divisible by 8. You can have them divisible by 4, but I wouldn't do anything quirky like have a line height of 21, because you'll soon see that it goes out of space with the grid, and your horizontal spacing and your vertical spacing then sometimes look a little bit odd. It also helps with doing calculations if you're doing a pixel perfect design for a high fidelity mockup. Next, it's really trendy nowadays in a lot of places to add metadata to hover over information. So for instance, right now I can see that there's a speaker hovering over on top of my name as a pill. But when you look at those, you've got to think about the visual styling, because what happens if it's actually a notification, like you are presenting, I can see on my screen as a notification. But what if the buttons also look the same? It doesn't really help if there's a button, a notification, and a pill that all use the same styling, because how does the user know what's interactive or not? By making differentiating visual styling on these, it helps the user identify what they can and can't do. 16. Fonts in capitals. Right, whenever you're choosing a font, always make sure that you look at the font in capitals. So for instance, this font, checking the font capital letters, I especially like to check Q and J, because then you can see where the descenders are and just see if they're going to interfere with the text below or anything like that. But most people choose a font by putting in like the company name or putting in the teaser line, and it might not have those capital Q and J's in them that then might be added during the content. Next one. Center justified text. Right, here's a quick rule. When you're looking at a website, if you've got more than 50% of the width and center aligned text, only have it as a 2-line maximum. If it's between halfway and a third, make it a 3-line maximum, and if it's less than a third of the screen, have 4-line maximum. That way you can make sure that the text is nice and easily and readable. Next. Right, make sure that whenever you're collecting information from the user, you're collecting it the same way that the user has it. So for instance, recently I saw a bad example where I was filling in a credit card, and when they asked for the expiry date, they had the month of the expiry in words: January, February, March, Jan, Feb, March. But is that the way that you see it on a card? No, all bank cards have the expiry month as a number, 03. The same can be said about account numbers and things like that. If, for instance, someone really only sees their account number on printed letters, make sure that the way you collect it is the same as on the printed letters. Here in New Zealand, our Inland Revenue Department, your Inland Revenue number is either an 8-digit number or a 9-digit number separated by hyphens. The issue that you've got there is when you see it on printed, for instance, mine is a 8-digit, so it's got 2 digits, then a hyphen, 3 digits, hyphen, then a 3-digit. You don't have a leading 0, but whenever you fill it in on a form online, they always want it 9 digits long and add in a leading 0. But that's never the way that you see it on any printed out information. So make it easier for the users. Show them how, give them the format the same way as they have it available to them. Next, repetitive tasks. Right, simply make repetitive tasks as quick and easy to do for the user as possible, but never go as far as Amazon dash buttons. If you're not familiar with Amazon dash buttons, the idea of this was that you could have the button available to you. So if we took the Tide, the washing up powder, the idea was like you're working in a hotel, you have that next to the washing machines, you come to do the washing, and you see the washing powder's low, so you press the button. An hour later, someone else comes in, sees the washing powder low, they press the button. An hour later, someone else does. And automatically it's ordered 3 loads of washing powder and they come the next day. Because that button doesn't have any checks or confirmations. So if you've got repetitive tasks, make them as quick and easy as possible, but if they need to, make sure they have the right checks and confirmations. Next, line length. Okay. Robert Bringhurst is one of the top people in typography, and he wrote the elements of typographic styles, and he found 3 key rules. The line length should be ideally somewhere between 40 characters and 75 characters long to allow it to be easily read. And research from him shown that the optimal length is 66 characters. So when you're looking at your optimal screens, think about the line length that you've got. So if it's multiple lines, think about how you can generate the correct style to go those line lengths. Next, nerves. Okay. If you get nervous speaking, here's a quick tip for you on how to do it. What you can do is you can take your hand and you can gently, just wait for the video to load, you can gently press your finger across your hand, fingers, each finger, or alternately, you can do it across the knuckles. And as you can see from the one hand, it's hard to see those. What it helps is it helps you stop your shaking, and it's just a calming mechanism. So there's a tip if you get nerves. Next, search results. Nice and easy. Always have 2 full search results on your most common mobile site. End of. Next, quantitative versus qualitative. Make sure that you don't get fooled into giving false metrics or false data. So, for example, recently I was running 3 co-design workshops, and in each of the co-design workshops, someone said that they don't use the online reminder functionality. So I was talking to someone and I put that we had this, and they were like, "Well, 100% of the people don't use the reminder functionality." No, we didn't ask 100% of the people. We heard it in 100% of the workshops. But then again, we didn't ask everybody. So imagine if we did ask everybody. If there was 10 people in each session, and we only went around the room and only one person said it, these 2 statements could both be true. 3 workshops, and at 100% of the workshops, people said they don't use the online reminder functionality. But when you ask them individually, only 10% of participants don't use the online reminder functionality, and 90% do. As you can see, the top one often seems like has overinflated value. So make sure that that your qualitative data doesn't create false metrics. 8, cards versus styling. Right, so one of the common trends nowadays is to use cards. Take these 2 cards, for instance. You've got the card on the left has the action 1 and action 2 buttons and links, but card 2 doesn't. So imagine, what does the user click on card 2? Is it interactive? Do they click on the picture? Do they click on the card title? And if they do, is that the same for card 1? So if they've got the same styling, how does the user know which card to use? And also, if you've got panels where you're grouping things into a larger section, if you use the same border styling as you do on your cards, again, you're not helping the user understand what's interactive and what's information. 7, qualitative design. Nice and simple. Qualitative design is where you give users qualitative data in order for them to make the decisions. So this could be as simple as the estimated time it takes to read a blog, or the length of the video takes to play, or even the number of images in a gallery. If you don't have that qualitative data and just have symbols instead, you're not giving the users enough information for them to make the informed decisions. Next, survey questions. Here's a quick one. So some quick rules. Make survey questions simple, necessary. So if your marketing department asks you to here's that you're doing a survey and asks you to add this question for them, if it's not related to your survey, tell them no. Non-leading. Don't lead people with the questions. Like Shanshan said, it's especially in surveys and user interviews, you don't want to lead people with questions. So it's good to practice that. Avoid too many yes/no questions. If you've got too many yes/no questions, after a while, people will just tend to go for the same answer. Use plain English if it's in English, or basically use plain language so that people can understand the questions. Don't use jargon. Don't ask any questions that this and that question. So they ask, do you blah, 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 this and blah, 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 that, because the response will only be to the that. And test before using. Test it. Ask your partner, your kids, your neighbor to run through the survey with you, or ask someone in your company that's not directly involved, like the receptionist or someone from finance, to test the survey before you use for end users. Next, information architecture. When designing information architecture, it's really key to look from both the top down and the bottom up. This is also really key if you're doing a redesign, because if you're doing a redesign, it's always good to do a content audit to see what content stay in. And by doing it from the bottom up and from the top down, it makes sure that the pathways and the logical steps are there. It helps with the structure, and it helps also with having intuitive breadcrumbs. Next, job titles. Never assume people have a job title. So here's a scenario. I was working with a government organisation doing some interviews, and I spoke to someone who was an advisor. So when I spoke to them and found out what they did, they were a policy advisor, and they advised whether or not the project was aligning to rules and regulations from the government. When I looked at the rest of the team, there was 3 other people that were advisors, but only one of those actually gave policy advice. Another one actually gave financial advice, and one of them gave business advice and was more actually like a business analyst. But what I found out was the reason why they all had the same job title was that the government opposition was complaining about the number of people that the current government had working in policy. So all the policy advisors got changed to advisors. A few years later, they complained about how many people were looking at finances and not actually doing work. So they changed all the financial advisors to advisors. So if you just went in the job title, you would assume that those 4 people all did the same thing, but they didn't. So never assume by the job title. 3, designing for behaviour. When you're designing, think of which one of these behaviours you're designing for, or you might be designing for both. Are you designing something that's in and out? People come in quickly, do what they need to do fast, and then they're out again. And they come back lots, but they're always in and out. Or are you designing for someone to hang about and have the experience of whatever you're designing for? 2, feedback. Whenever you're collecting feedback on a website or an app, make sure that it's clear to the user whether or not you're getting feedback for the whole site or just the page that they're on. Also, make sure that you provide them a confirmation that you've received the feedback and what the next steps are. And then also give them the ability to go back to where they were. The most annoying thing is you say you find an issue, you put it in feedback, and then you can't go back to where you are. Frustrating. And last but by no means least, when to finish a presentation. Okay, when it comes to presentations, you've got to understand the emotional journey people go through. So in storytelling, there's 6 main ways of emotional arcs, they're called. So you've got the rags to riches, where you start at low and go up to high, or riches to rags, where you start high and go down low. Or you've got the Icarus, where it's all going well and then your wings burn and you get a great big fall. Or you've got Oedipus, where it starts with a fall, then a rise, and then a fall again. Or Cinderella, where it's all going great, you go to the ball, you lose your slipper, you're stuck with your evil stepsisters, but then in the end you get Prince Charming. Or is it the man in a hole scenario? You fall in the hole, you get the big fall, but then you actually get the rise. So thinking of an example, for instance, you might think climate change. You might want to go for the Oedipus, where you tell everybody the story of how bad things are, that really bad, and things need to be done. But then you go with the rise of, but it's not too late. We've still got time. But then if we don't do it, the world will end up doomed. And that's why I'm going to finish. So thank you.
Thank you, Dominic. That was awesome. That was like, wow, so many snippets of practical knowledge. Thanks. I enjoyed it. I think people also enjoyed. Yeah, I can see the emojis. Yeah, they're reacting well. So now we have our Q&A session, and I'm gonna hand it over to Ian, and he's going to be picking questions and asking to both speakers.
Hi everyone, my name is Ian. Everyone can see me okay and hear me? Cool. Cool, so I just want to invite both our speakers back. I think there's so many questions, and I think both our speakers probably can comment on both of them, on these questions. So I would like to maybe keep the Q&As kind of very casual, and I'm going to try to rope them into themes. So forgive me if I miss something very specific. So before we start, the first thing is that a lot of people are asking about if the presentations are going to be shared, if they're going to be recorded. So I'm just going to say yes, right, Dominic Shanshan?
Yeah, they were, last year they were all recorded and shared on the 24 Hours of UX website about a week and a half, 2 weeks after the event.
Awesome, very cool. And we'll find a way to get them all to you. So the first thing I want to talk about is, first question here is that there's a lot of questions around this idea that companies might have different expectations of what a designer might be versus what maybe personally as a designer you want to grow into. So I'll lead with something from Peter. So companies still today look for the junior UX designer who is great at graphic design, front-end development, and does a bit of PHP. Where do you see this type of expectation from companies versus expectation from generalists? And following up to that, Ankita says that companies are asking and setting unrealistic set of skills for UX designer as well as UI developer for entry-level positions. Like, how do we counter this? And should we as designers also start focusing on development too? I'm guessing that's a joke. Shanshan, Dominic, any thoughts on that?
Yeah. All I was going to say was recently I've been looking for a junior designer to assist me on a project, but I know that the skills that the client wants is graphic design as well as UX design. The one thing I made sure that from a junior perspective is that you're not looking for experience in those, because someone won't have as much experience as a junior across multiple things, but you're looking at what they're interested in. And so I've done it before where I've done lots of recruiting of graduates. And what I did was basically have all the different UX disciplines and just ask them to have 10 sticky notes on what are you most interested in, to see where or not. And often what you're doing is they're not just looking for you to have all those skills, but they're looking for across the team to have all those skills so that they all match up, so that you're not in one peak of UX design, but you've also got UI design and UX research across the board of the team. So I would say, don't worry. If someone wants a junior to have all of those, then you probably don't want to work there anyway.
All right. I just want to fit into that as well. I think it kind of, boils down to the different types of organizations, kind of like what Dominic's saying. Like, you guys have a lot of power in deciding where do you want to go as well. So I worked at all the different organizations that kind of have very different expectation on designers. So Optimal Workshop, for example, when we hire juniors, we kind of think about them as, we want to invest in their growth. So our interns come on board, and then we try to show them all the different spectrums of design, and then they explore, and we support them to grow, time box it to a summer, see how far they grow. And from there, we kind of like figure out where do they fit. So that's like a type of organization that's actually growth oriented. But on the other hand, I also know, unfortunately, there are a lot of organizations, they just want to hire intern as like, that more affordable budget reason. And that's fair. It's an advantage that we can exploit it. That's all good. So if you are hired as a junior person and then they have a very specific project for you, a specific role, that is fine. You can still learn from there. You kind of just like where I started was like doing visual design. It's not as fulfilling, but I was still able to learn. I just use that as an opportunity to learn about the other roles that I play with. And over time, you'll be able to kind of see. So keep your ears and eyes open, analyze your organization, see where the opportunities are or the challenges they face, and use design thinking skills to help them reframe or kind of like, just gain little wins. And over time, it'll kind of like, I guess, sell the practice of UX or show people the value that you can bring more, and then you'll probably get more opportunities. But if it is not that type of organization that you want to work in, over time, there's misalignment of value, they don't care about your growth, then I do recommend, move on from there. So hope that helps a little.
I want to dig into that a little bit because Jaylin Ko says, I think also hits on the same point, is that businesses with low UX maturity love generalists because they're budget friendly. How can we help these businesses really understand the importance of scaling up the UX team? Or I guess, and there are other questions as well. For example, how do we convey the true value of being experienced and value generous without becoming the solve everything person? That's from Nurul Ahmad Furlong. So do you have any maybe tangible advice to give for people in that position?
Actually, I'm curious to hear from Kami and Ian and Dominic as well, because as far as I'm concerned, you guys are all kick-ass UX generalists.
Yeah, I'm mostly doing research now, so yeah, and that's my happy place. But I guess, I now work for a nonprofit that really cares for humans in general, not just users or customers. But I think UX nowadays, at the same time, that can be a good selling point to say you must have something that is attractive or adequate to your users and customers, so that you grow. You can totally correlate, and it's fine. Even if you're a humanist deep inside and you say it doesn't matter, you shouldn't be attached to return on investment. I think as designers, if we learn to talk the business talk, that really elevates design in any organization. There is a really interesting community called Leaders of Awesomeness. It's an awesome name, by Jared Spool, the UX unicorn, if you don't know him. And Shanshan is gone. She might be back. Yeah, she's back. And they provide really cool sessions, free sessions, and also they offer a full paid program that is about the UX strategy, and I think is really useful. All the knowledge that Jared puts on this platform for free. I can send the link here. But yeah, I think it's just important that we try to align with the business and talk, use the business language and understand how you can align UX metrics to whatever business metrics your organization uses, and this way you can elevate. And you don't have to have a title to do that. You just need the initiative and, talk to people, talk to your manager, and there you go.
So I think that it's key that if you are in one of those low maturity ones, is that you build up the maturity. So I've been in organizations before where I've been brought in to do more of a business analysis requirements gathering role rather than actually do the design role, and they were thinking that their branding agency could do the design role. And it's all about educating them and getting them to understand the benefits. And it's also like whenever you present something is to make sure that you go, this is what we've got, but this is what we could have, and explain what you could get if there was more time, more resource and everything available. So I recently did some user research for a financial company, and I was like, this is what we know, and we know that these personas are identified, but we don't know much about these personas, and also we think that people transition from one to another, so give us some more time, give us some more people, and we can do more. And so it's all about explaining what can be done.
Well said. I think that's yeah, I'll just skip. I think those are great answers.
On the topic of organizations, I know someone asked, could you give me an example of organization or company which supports designers to work as full stack designers? I guess this could be maybe if there's anyone on the top of your head of role models or organizations that have good UX maturity that people should look to as maybe points to aim for in terms of what what it could be like. Do either of you have any that you want to just quickly throw out while I check on the questions?
I want to quickly comment on this question itself. Like, I actually don't have the insight into like that many organizations I work where I work. And I think as a researcher, you're trained to like, okay, now I can't generalize things. I definitely cannot speak for the other organizations. Yeah, and it's actually hard to say like where different organizations are in terms of their UX maturity. But this question was asked in a different occasion before. So if you are looking for a role, it is actually up to you to do the research to find out what type of organization they are. So there are a lot of different strategies. Just think about it as doing user research or ethnography. about this company. So what you want to learn is their culture, their expectation, what's the experience like working there. So with that in mind, I guess most of you guys already have the answer or strategy, but just be specific. For example, you can look them up on LinkedIn, look at their website. Of course, those are the first steps. Reach out to your friends and network who's worked there before or kind of knows someone who works there. Have a chat with them. Ask if you could kind of like reach out to their design lead or like a designer there. And then just present it as like, I want to learn more about what's that experience like working there. People would appreciate this initiative that you have, but also you get to learn and gauge that information. So I think that's a case-by-case kind of thing. Depends on where you want to work, really. Yeah. Does that help?
Yeah. There are some websites out there like Glassdoor, where previous people who have worked at companies share what it's like to work there. And so that's obviously, it's not popular in New Zealand, but it's popular in the States and in Europe to find extra information about companies. But as Shanshan said, the best is do your research, look at their website, see what they share in there about, and even the way that they write their advertisement. If you think the advertisement's been written by someone in HR, then are you a step away from the actual person that you want to speak to? So speak to people who actually do the job.
I think that's a really good answer. Yeah, being proactive. You don't just take it at face value. So I want to just quickly reflect on the poll results. So, in the question, how long have you been working UX? Oh, sorry, not how long. What do you do in your current role? With the exception of workshop facilitation, it seems like we have a pre-even split. So it seems like we're in an audience of generalists, and the number of questions from people around, being a design generalist for such a long time, and kind of like asking questions around how do you decide where next to go, what skills to learn. So, for example, as a generalist, Noor Ahmad asks again, as a generalist with 22 years of design experience, I've hit the which direction to move up. I think there's this typo here, but anyway, he comments there's so many paths to choose. Definitely identify with juggler syndrome. Catherine Hall says something similar. So the question would be, as a generalist, how do you decide where you want to grow? Where do you decide what skills to learn to next? How do you assess yourself? How do you evaluate your effectiveness as a UX designer, generalist?
I think it depends on, like everyone's different. There are different interests. If you want to keep moving up in your organization as the kind of like into a design leadership role, that's pretty straightforward, or into a not design but leadership and strategic role, that's also pretty straightforward. Or you can work at other companies that's kind of just like get bigger scope. Like, for example, going from startup to kind of like scale up to enterprise to like other organizations. So those are like the straightforward answer. I can reflect a little bit about kind of where I am at. So I see there are different pathways. One is keep learning different technology or different kind of like topics that's related to UX, but it's always growing. So for example, now the voice interface, I don't have much experience, so I can learn those things and I, specialize those things because those are still frontiers. Same with like artificial intelligence and all the other kind of like, I guess, technology. So that's one way of growing. But personally, I want to grow for impact. What I'm seeing in myself, for example, is that I learn about a thing and I kind of get pretty good at it. Then I can do it. And then I try to help other people, empower other people to do it. But then I realize the value in what I do. Then I want to teach. So this is where I'm getting at, is that the next stage for me is going into design education to empower and then enable more people to do what I can do, like apply design thinking in all the different fields, because we as designers know how impactful and powerful like the trade that we have can be. Like there's a lot of change we can initiate using design practice. So for me, like that's the area that I want to go. And then also applying design on things that's typically not considered a design-related field. So, for example, I've been designing websites and product. Okay, those are straightforward. Service, that's a slightly bigger scope. But we're experienced designers. There are so many other things out there, so many complex problems to solve. All those wicked problems out there about communities, about things that's kind of just a little bit ambiguous. And maybe there aren't really people with the right skills. So that's where you call in a generalist and a designer who's resourceful to kind of work on those things. So that's how I see myself continue to grow. Not sure if that helps for the folks who's been working for 22 years and trying to figure out where to go next. Yeah. I would like to hear from Dominic as well.
Yeah, go for the man with 20 plus years. Yeah, so from my point of view, it's, if you think about it, do you actually want to, Shan said, grow sideways and have more skills across different things, or do you want to actually go up and go into management? Because then you've got to look at people skills and financial skills if you're going somewhere where you're managing budgets. So that's first, think of which way you want to go. Secondly, if you've on the junior side and you've got a mentor, talk to your mentor, let them help do an assessment of you. And if not, if you're one of the senior, actually talk to people. If the best way is to be honest. So if you got someone that you work with that you can go, where do you think I'm weak? Where do you think I could improve? Just be open and have those conversations. And then that'll help you a lot to identify where you want to go. And then the third thing I would say on it is think about those peripheral positions that you interact with, so you can learn more about those. So for instance, I used to do software testing. So my way of doing user flows, I know from my experience of software testing, help software testers plan the way that they do their testing, so they can plan their testing early so that they're not surprised when they get a delivery and they've got the acceptance criteria, because they understand the user flows because it's written in a way that matches their methodologies. Or think about business analysts, think about service designers, think about product owners, and think about those peripheral roles and how you can increase your skills to greatly affect the handovers and things like that.
So I'm going to reflect on another poll answer, which is that 41% of our audience says that they have less than a year of experience. A lot of people here have questions related to starting out. Some people are saying, what is the, for example, with so many non-designers getting into UX so easily these days with short course, short courses, will the field be hitting saturation soon? What is the need of formal design degree if UX is taught online on every other website? And how there seems to be this question of, lots of people are picking up UX as a skill. How do you stand out when you're starting out? Is one of those questions. Do you have anything to add to that, especially in the context of, the idea of going to study UX design formally versus maybe being a self-taught designer? Is there value for that?
Yeah. So I'm a self-taught designer. My degree is in maths and computer studies. I've done the odd course here and there, but most of my learning is on the job learning. But I've taken on quite a few people into my company on the junior side. And when I talk to them, I often give them a test, and it's completely non-related to any of my clients or any work like that, because you should never do a test that's related to a client, because they're getting your ideas for free. Wait for them to pay for you. So I've just got a couple of mock tests that are just like, pretend this is a bank. There's these there's these colors from the branding, and there's these menu items that you want. Please design a side menu and give it back to me. And so I'm not looking really the end product. I am obviously making sure that they don't do anything completely disastrous in choosing what color goes with what color. But what I'm looking for is how they've structured it, and also how they've gone about doing their work. So like, for instance, if they're using Illustrator, have they used the layers correctly? If they're using Sketch XD, have they created components or even grouped things correctly and things like that? And when I look at someone's portfolio, I'm not looking at the end result. I'm looking at the story of how they got from this problem to the solution, because that's all around. That's what you can do. You can grow. If you can understand that, you can grow up the other skills around it.
Yeah, I think.
Do you think that someone who, sorry, Shanshan, do you think someone, because I'm reflecting on another question, do you think that someone who might have a formal degree would have a leg up in terms of getting a job, getting their foot in the door?
Often, yes, purely because they've had more time to understand the processes. And so with these crash courses, you're learning a lot of the buzzwords and you're learning a lot of this, but how you link things together and the processes that you do are often missing. And more of the formal courses, they have those actual projects that you do. So like, for instance, the junior designer I was looking at before, she's got a portfolio and only 2 of them are for actual clients. The rest of them are all university projects that she's worked on, but she's explained how she worked with the team at university and how they went about the process. And so it's having that depth of, not experience, but depth of being embedded in the processes.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. That's really useful. And in my experience, when I was transitioning to UX, that's exactly what I did. It was, I'm learning, and I was learning by myself. I have a degree in design and master's in design, but I was learning the practical knowledge that it's required to do the job. And I was learning at the same time that I was applying to projects, even side projects or for small clients. And thing that I did that I think was quite useful was I did some research on how hiring managers or the people, my users to my portfolio, would be interacting with it. What are the things they're after? And what you said resonates with my research of years and years ago. There was people hiring or looking at your portfolio to evaluate your experience. They're not after final mockups that look shiny. If you're looking for a position in UX, they're actually looking for your thinking and for your process, how you got from A to B, and how things didn't work and then you pivoted, or things that you tried and you got a result and then you decided to move to the next thing to do. And yeah, I think it's quite a useful tip you gave. Talk to people like you. Go ask, or if you can. If people don't answer to you, just look for evidence in the internet. People sometimes, on blogs, they give you this information. As a hiring manager, that's the thing that I look for, etc.
Is it a red flag if a company you're interviewing for asks you to do a case study or a mock test on their app? This is from another audience member, Lim.
So I did one. I've done a couple whereby I didn't get the job because they said they couldn't afford me. And then a few months later, I saw my design test actually in the final product. So definitely don't do it. It's just like they're basically doing user research. Well, they're doing A/B testing by creating lots of designs. And for me, it's ethically wrong. So I always do tests that are completely outside, like irrelevant. Like one of my tests that I gave someone who's doing a lot of visual design that I was looking for was do a star for a game, and that was it. Something completely generic, not needed. So yeah, ethically wrong in my opinion.
Cool. Can I circle back and just chat about lateral moving into UX and stuff? So first of all, it's fascinating because like I went to uni over 10 years ago. So although I did a design degree, it was not UX design. We didn't learn anything that's related to UX. I kind of had to learn everything on the job as well. It sounds like the same story with Cami and Dominic, which is fascinating. So we all have to have that process of like learning things on our own. And that's the point of like, say, being a generalist is that the whole industry moves and you move with it. So it's, yeah, I'm just trying to kind of like assure you guys it's all good. Like you don't have to have a degree. Your degree in other fields is still relevant. I think a lot of UX nowadays is about understanding people, and it's about kind of bringing, it's creating experience. So your life experience from other fields, like they're incredibly valuable. So if you started, say, did a BA, like you learn about humanity, subjects about humanity, that's like applicable. If you did kind of like, business, like super relevant. Like I've seen a lot of people who's kind of got a degree in like business and kind of moved into UX. Even like, let's say you did psychology or philosophy, like all of those could be super relevant and actually might give you a advantage over someone who's kind of purely have done design, because then we focus on the solution, whereas people from the other industry or like background may think about things more holistically and bringing in diverse perspective. I guess that's my point from earlier, is that there is no set path. You should challenge that and question that and own your own story. It's part of like the whole thing about diversity, like finding your own mix as a generalist. But I do understand the challenge. Like, how do you get your foot in the door? I think if you are coming from a strong background, say in psychology or something that's already quite related to experience, understanding humans, then you just like, in my opinion, doing a short course would be a pretty good or sufficient first step to have you understand the vocab and the process and stuff like that. And really, like what I was saying before, is practice. Getting hands-on experience is like the most valuable thing. So like I would work for an NGO or some other kind of like, could be friends and family, they have a business. You just like really try to use that as a case study and kind of like solve some problems for them and like apply those skills and then write it into a case study. Does that help?
To back up what Shan said, like my degree is in maths and computing, but the most useful thing I actually got from university was I was part of the student union exec committee, and I ran the student advice centre. So if any students had any issues or concerns, they would come to the advice centre. So in order to run that, I had to go out and do some like courses on my own, off my own back, for like counselling, listening skills, counselling skills, advanced listening skills, negotiation skills. And those were actually what set me in to actually make it easier for a career in different things, because those were tangible skills of experience talking to people in a particular environment. And so if you might have skills that don't say UX design, but when someone's looking at it, they'll look across the board at what else have you done in order to back that up.
But I'll also add that some people don't really see how transferable skills are, and how what is called soft skills are quite important sometimes, depending on the company, depending on the process, especially when it's a third party that deals with the part of the first part of the recruitment, it can be quite tricky. So I think if you have any opportunity to explain that on a cover letter, or even better in a conversation, if you get to have a pre-interview or a round of interview early on, I think it's quite interesting to say, yes, I have done this in the field, but I also have all those experiences here that are transferable in this way, and I believe will help me with this and that. So highlight what you have, because life experience can like be highly transferable and really help to be a good listener. So if you worked in retail, you might have amazing listening skills or empathy that you have to relate and feel the person before you approach them. So many things can be transferable.
That's a brilliant point. I was just going to clap and basically tell your story and own your story and kind of like relate it to whatever like UX is. You do have to have a very good understanding of like what UX is about, and then think about how your own journey and your story relate to that. There was a point from before as well. What was this one about? Like, what was the question you were supposed to ask?
I think we circled back.
Yeah.
I believe.
Yep.
But I think holding on to those skills, I think that's a really good place to ask a couple more questions from people. So, Catherine asks, what part of the generalist job is not focused on web-focused questions? I assume maybe, and then in brackets, are there other meaningful fields? I assume like this is about what are the skills, as you've talked about. There are a couple skills that we can expand into outside of. That we don't talk about as much.
Yeah, service design, that's a starting point. If you don't go into product or web, like service design, I think it's becoming like more and more relevant, and people start to see the value of it, and you're by default solving quite complex problems. Like I want to say architecture and interior design, that's also a type of like very holistic experience design, but yeah.
Inversely, someone asked, is it important to learn UX as a marketer who is focused on the strategy making, especially in digital marketing? I guess this is coming from the other side. You know, being a generalist UXer, you might pick up lots of different skills, but maybe, you know, from a different role, do you see UX as a worthwhile skill to pick up from generalists coming in from different backgrounds?
Yeah, I do. So I can give a key example. My wife actually works in comms and PR. And so she's done a bit of UX in terms of looking at how she helps give things to their designers for publications and for marketing promotions and things like that, to actually make sure that like those call to actions are clear, and everything's intuitive and in line and formatted correctly. And also with the rise in UX writing as well, thinking about those words that we use and how we describe the interactions, it's getting more and more crossover with like the comms, PR, and even like editorial things like that, where people need that crossover.
And I think it's a good, not actually segue, but I saw a question before that was the classic, should designers code? And I think that that's quite appropriate, because as other people that work with or around design, in my opinion, are co-designing whatever global experience you're offering as a business. And it's often seen as should designers code, and not should perhaps developers or software developers understand a little bit about UX as they are coding the final product that these people are going to interact with.
And let me jump in there, because we've had a great Q&A and it's really good. However, we'll need to wrap up, as we'll have other sessions starting that we will need to host. And we have a raised hand from Carla Fernandez. Cami, are you okay with bringing her on the stage for her question?
Sure.
Okay, so let's see if this works. It's the first time that we're trying it, so let's see if Carla is joining. Seems not. Either she disappeared or it was just a test. But yeah, I think that, I'm sure, Shinsen can finish up with the answer. We wanted to jump in just to say, a couple of things wrapping up. On one side, thank you very much for the speakers and for the organizing group, and also for our attendees who were with us. The good news is, if you go back to schedule, you will see a number of talks that are addressing sort of how to get started, or how to be effective, or how to plan your your journey as a designer. So there's a number of those on it. I really recommend that you browse through, both days and look at some things that fit this. And don't forget about our keynotes. They will be coming up as well, so they are highlighted as well on the schedule. You can also build your own schedule. So if you see a talk that you like, you can click, I think, follow this talk or something similar, remind me, and then it will be added to your schedule and you'll get a reminder when it starts, so you won't miss it. As a lot of you are sort of asking about advice and getting started and things like that, I do want to mention our podcast, which is called 24 Minutes of UX. And what we do there is we actually match up a seeker of advice with a giver of advice. So you can go to 24minutesofux.com, not 24 hours, but 24minutesofux.com. And there you can apply by specifying a topic that you want to find out more on. And the more specific you get with either, being a seeker of advice or a giver of advice, the better it is, because then the better we can match you with someone who is more relevant. And in that 24 Minutes of UX podcast, we basically just do the introduction like we do here. And it is a discussion, a dialogue between the seeker and the giver for 24 minutes. And the episodes are already online, so you can check those out, and do feel free to sign up as well. And so with that, you can go back to the schedule if you want, but I'll let Shenzhen, she just started something when I jumped in, finish up her thoughts. And with that, I will also thank you very much.
Fantastic. Cool. So I will just quickly bring back the question. It's kind of along the line of like, what about other people who do other things? Should they learn UX, and how does that work? I think this is the thing. You as a UX person in your organization, you don't just do the work. You are also a champion of UX and design thinking, and that's always part of your role. So, for example, in my organization, in order for other people to work with me better, I regularly do things like lunch and learn, where I kind of talk to people about what UX is about. It's basically free education for them. And then people are like, oh, that's fascinating. What this does is that you are inviting other people in. You're making like the, people who's doing business, marketing, sales, development, knowing what UX is. And you try to tailor it to a point that's kind of like relevant to them as well. Use like GIFs or internal jokes or whatever, if that helps. So they will start to appreciate and understand what UX can do for them and for your organization. Once they do that, really like we need to break silos. What this means is like the developer is gonna start to think a little bit like you. And I've seen that happening firsthand. It's magical. Like our developers can do research, and I don't write code, but I know enough about technology to converse with them. That's all I need. It's just vice versa. It's like we are generalists. We do dovetail into other people's process, but also we need to broadcast what we do and invite other people in. UX is like a really holistic thing, and it's actually quite powerful and valuable for other people too, to reframe the problems they have. So sell it in a way that kind of helps them, I suppose. That's what I wanted to leave you guys with. Yeah.
So my point on the should UX as code, completely up to you. If you want to get in a position where you're doing front-end dev or even back-end dev, it's completely up to you. But I would recommend that all UXers understand some level of technology so that you can have those conversations with the developers, and especially you can understand the limitations. So I did a lot of work with SharePoint, and SharePoint had a lot of limitations in terms of what you could do from a design perspective. And so if I had come up with a standard web design, then it would have gone too expensive to build, too expensive to do that. Like recent tech person was talking to me, they were doing a site in Drupal, and I was unaware of how bad Drupal is as modal windows. So the designs had modals popping up and it couldn't do the verification properly. So in order to implement it, they were saying it was going to cost double that it would do from a standard other CMS. And so understand the limitations of the technology that you're working in. That would be enough.
Thank you very much. There was great thoughts. And I think that to wrap this part up, start conversations, start dialogues with people in your company or just fellow designers about, hey, what does full stack designer mean to you? Because trust me, there will be people who say, well, full stack designer, like design, graphic, development. And then there will be people who say, no, like full, it's just design things and development doesn't fit in there. It's also worth talking with the developers on where they see the overlaps and where they see what they would do ending in terms of UX. And it's a very interesting field because we are in an area where a lot of UXers are generalizing because of technology that Dominic mentioned as well. So, we're basically at the end of how a simple website should be designed, because there's so many templates and ready-to-use solutions out there that more and more people will be using defaults, and that's not a huge problem. But that also means that there's a lot of opportunity in complex systems to be designed, and that's where Drupal and CMSs and technical limitations come in. So, be on the lookout for that. Kami, I wanted to thank you very much for bringing the awesome speakers, and of course, Dominic and Shenshan as well. And with that, if there's any parting words from you, then please do feel free, and then we'll wrap up the session.
Thank you for making this amazing event again. It's a mammoth amount of work, and it worked awesome for us. Everything was fine, smooth. And thanks to the speakers this year, it was really, really nice to have you. Really good content, really interesting. And it's not just me organizing. Ian, Yana also were here with us, and also previously helping us. So thank you for the rest of the crew, and lots of
thank you, Cami.
Gratitude. Thank you.
Also, thanks to everyone for asking brilliant questions. That was a great discussion. Thank you all.
All right, and hopefully see you in a next session soon. Goodbye all.
See ya. Bye.